good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome both physical audience and audience online to this event today. My name is Liliia Oprysk. I'm professor at the Faculty of Law at the University of Bergen. And with me on stage, I have Vitalii Poberezhnyi, researcher at the Truth Hounds, and also my colleague, professor of international criminal and refugee law, Terje Einarsen. And we are now in February, which means that in a few days, on 21st of February, there will be 4 years anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But just 2 years ago, we had another event here at Bergen Global talking about 10 years of war against Ukraine, because we have to remember that this has been ongoing since 2014. So the war actually started with the annexation of Crimea and the start of the war in eastern Ukraine. And despite maybe of this not being so widely known and not widely reported, actually this winter has been very there in Ukraine. And actually the last year was the deadliest for civilians in Ukraine since 2022. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine revealed just last month the numbers. So there were over 2,500 killed and over 12,000 injured persons in just 2025. So the war is not stopping, it's just getting more and more brutal. And actually, civilian population now faces the toughest winter since the start of full-scale invasion. To give you just some numbers, on February 3rd, Russian forces launched 450 drones and 71 missiles at Ukraine overnight. Just 3 days later, there were 408 drones and 39 missiles overnight. And this was during so-called moratorium on energy infrastructure strikes. So this is not happening. And we are really grateful today that we have Vitalii with us, who came here all the way from Kyiv. So I would like to start actually by asking Vitalii, what is the situation in Kyiv, our capital, at the moment?
Well, thanks for the question and for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here. So I live in Kyiv for 5 years, and this is the toughest winter and the toughest winter of the full-scale invasion, because this is a really cold winter, the coldest winter in around 10 or maybe even 20 years. And the normal temperature during the day could be minus 15 degrees Celsius or even minus 20. And Russian army has used this cold winter to toughen the life of civilian population. So they attack energy facilities and they started doing it in the autumn, and they regularly attack energy facilities in Kyiv. And now there are very tough electricity shortages in Kyiv and all around Ukraine, because Russia targets Kyiv in particular as the capital, but also other parts of Ukraine. And the shortages have spread all over the country. And it's the normal situation in Kyiv now to have the electricity only for a few hours during the day. For example, you can have electricity for 3 hours during the day, and all the rest of the time you don't have it. And this is the result of Russian attacks, which are regular, which are very, very persistent. And this is really a complete challenge for civilians in Kyiv and in other places around Ukraine. And there's also problems with the warmth in the flats, and there are also shortages of water sometimes. So Russia persistently targets the energy facilities, infrastructure, and that's makes some places almost uninhabitable in big cities. And this is going on from the autumn for a few months now.
So this has been obviously a deliberate structure on the deliberate plan on the part of the Russian Federation. So I just wanted to ask Terje to comment on the situation with having really harsh winter and then military strikes on the civilian infrastructure. What would be the international criminal law here on that?
Thank you. I think it's always useful to remember that the Russian attack and invasion, occupation, annexations are all unlawful under international law. So whether specific acts are, for instance, war crimes, that's another question. But I think it's useful to remember that everything Russia is doing in Ukraine are illegal acts, because they have no right to do anything in Ukraine. And it means that under international law, all these acts that you have described here are wrongful acts under international law, which then means that Russia is responsible under international law and should do reparations and make compensations for the destructions. But then the question is, are these acts also war crimes or other crimes? Because even if it's an unlawful act, doesn't necessarily mean that's a criminal act under international law. They're just part of the crime of aggression, so to speak. And then there are different crimes that are relevant and also different legal basis for it. For instance, the crime of terror, which is a crime under customary international law, could be relevant insofar as the aim of these attacks are to spread the terror and fear in the population, maybe to make part of the population to move. So that's one possibility. But the crime of terror as such is, for instance, not part of the Rome Statute for the ICC, the International Criminal Court, but it could be criminalized in some countries. And then the most straightforward one with regard to these drone attacks against infrastructure and energy facilities, that would be a war crime, the war crime of intentionally directing an attack against civilian objects. And then it would have to be decided whether these infrastructures and energy facilities are primarily civilian objects and used as such currently in Ukraine. And I guess the answer to that would be yes in Kiev. So probably yes, would be war crimes.
Yes, thank you, Terje, for the overview. We will get into some of those crimes later on, but it just shows that while Ukraine managed to withstand this full-scale invasion, right, for 4 years, and now this terrorizing the civilian population is just intensifying, right? Because Russia cannot win on the battlefield, but they are trying to get people to move out of Kiev, for example, which happened at the first days and weeks of full-scale invasion, but then people moved out. But because of this energy shortages, actually, the mayor of Kiev was suggesting for those people who can leave the city, they should be leaving. So thank you very much for this brief introduction to what is happening now in Ukraine. And when we talk about targeting this energy infrastructure, of course, we talk not about the small scale drones, which we will spend most of the time talking about today, but we talk about missiles, right, and large drones, which are used for that. For instance, type Shahed, which are produced in Iran. So before we go into the report itself, which is the topic of today, I would also like to ask you, Vitalii, if you could give us a little bit brief introduction about use and the role of drones in Russia's war against Ukraine more generally.
Yeah, thanks. So I believe that drones are the technology that has reshaped the Russo-Ukrainian war, and probably it reshapes warfare in general, because there are these long-range drones which are used against energy facilities in Kyiv and against big targets such as factories, plants, military headquarters, but also short-range drones. And short-range drones are quite a new technology, which was in a way invented in 2022 when the Ukrainian army was seeking for the solution to stop Russian advancement, because Russia has a bigger army, has more weapons. And at that time, when the full-scale invasion began, Ukraine yet didn't have that many help from Western allies in terms of weapons and support, and it needed some cheap and really quick solutions to stop Russian advancement. And the solution was short-range drones, as we call it. These are small drones which are very handicraft, which could be crafted in a garage in a few hours. And despite they are so cheap and so simple, they are extremely precise, because these drones have a direct connection to the pilot who sits in a trench, for example, and he has the control panel, and he can move the drone real time. And these drones also have video camera with video feed that goes directly to the pilot, and so therefore the pilot sees clearly where he's flying and what he's gonna be attacking. And these drones were really decisive, because they were stopping Russian armed vehicles and Russian tanks from advancing. And therefore, one such drone, which could cost around $100 or a few $100s, could stop a tank which costs thousands of dollars. And this was the breakthrough. And it gave a lot of opportunities for Ukrainian army. But then Russians have copied the technology, because they've seen how effective it is. And the technology is quite simple, as I said. So they have just copied the technology of producing small drones. And they have, and Russia has more capacities to produce the drones, because it has larger armies and just larger capacities. And therefore, some sort of a race of drones has started, and both Russia and Ukraine have started competing in who produces more drones, because it seemed that the more drones you produce, the more effective your army would be on the front line. And that led to the stalemate, because none of the parties can penetrate the defense of the other one, because any armed vehicles would be just eliminated by the drones, and you cannot make big advancement by ground forces, by stormtroopers. You can make some very tactical small advancement, but you cannot penetrate the defense in such situation. And that's the reason why there's this stalemate, when none of the parties can make a large advancement for more than 3 years now, I think. So yeah, so drones are this breakthrough and a big change, but they also pose great risks for civilians, and that's what I will tell about next. Yes.
Yeah, so we see a range of different drones being used in Ukraine, and whereas at the start of full-scale invasion, it was the Ukrainian kind of innovation which allowed to actually withstand some of the attacks. We see that Russia is catching up, and the problem is, of course, for Ukraine that the front lies on Ukrainian territory, right? So that use of the short-range drones, it affects Ukrainian civilian population, of course, to a large extent. But Vitalii, before we talk about the report, could you tell a little bit about the Truth Hound organization that you represent, and what are the activities that you do in Ukraine?
Yes, so Truth Hounds is a NGO in Ukraine, and it exists from 2014, from when the war actually started. And the initial aim of the organization was to document possible war crimes, and Truth Hounds was the team of lawyers and just activists who went to the east where the war was ongoing and were documenting the testimonies of people who witnessed the Russian shellings or who were victims of Russian shelling or any other types of attacks. And they also were making videos, photographs of the places which were shelled to collect the evidence. But then the organization developed, the new departments were created, then the law department was created, the department of investigations was created, and now the Truth Hounds is a big team, but we have different subjects we deal with, but the main line, the idea is to point out that Russia conducts this war in a very unlawful way, and all the departments we have this common idea of spreading the awareness of that Russian aggression is unlawful and consists of many crimes, and also it's about bringing perpetrators to responsibility. Yes, so all what we do is connected to researching, documenting, and explaining Russian war and pointing out all those atrocities that Russian army commits in Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Vitalii. So for today's event, we chose to focus on the report which Truth Hounds has prepared, which is called Killzone: How Russian Drones Are Devastating the River Dnipro's Right Bank. And I think it is really timely because actually the civilian casualties caused by short-range drones increased by 120% in 2025. These are the numbers of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine. So we see actually that these casualties are just growing, which are caused by the short-ranged drones. So, for instance, in 2025, according to this mission, there were 577 civilians killed and over 3,000 injured. So, Vitalii, could you tell us more on what you focused on this report? Which type of drones are we talking here about? Are those the drones that everybody can purchase? Are those specialized drones?
So here we talk about these handicraft drones mostly, and I'll talk briefly about them right before that, and can also show you the map. So when these drones became a new technology, then they become massively produced, and they started posing the threat for civilians, and that seems some sort of a contradiction, because, as I said, this is a very precise technology, because the operator, a pilot of a drone, sees clearly what he's attacking, and he has real-time control of the vehicle. So then the question could be raised why there are so many civilian casualties, because if you talk about artillery shelling or a missile attack, those who launched the missile or shell, they do not have that high level of awareness what's happening on the ground in the place they are attacking. But it's different with small range drones. The operator clearly understands what's going on on the ground, what is his target, but nevertheless, the amount of civilian casualties from small drones is extremely high, and it's extremely high in the south of Ukraine, where the Russian and Ukrainian parties are divided by Dnipro River, and you can see this map. And there are 3 lines of different colors, but they could be united into one. And this is all this stretch of the front line where the Dnipro becomes the sort of a front, the obstruction that none of the parties can penetrate, because Dnipro is the largest Ukrainian river, and therefore it's really hard to make any military advancement because of that obstruction. And therefore this part of the front line is the part with the lowest intensity of attacks. And there's shelling, there are drone attacks, but the intensity is in general much lower than in other parts of the front line, where the parties are divided by the ground fortifications. And nevertheless, despite all this, there are extremely high civilian casualties, specifically from drone attacks here in the south. And there's a term human safari, which designates these drone attacks. And I believe it was coined in Kherson, the largest city on the western riverbank of Dnipro. And that's how locals called the drone attacks, because it seemed like Russian drone pilots just sort of hunt civilians for them, and they called it a safari because of that. So we asked this question ourselves, why that happens, why the most precise military technology available in the region with the lowest intensity of attacks leads to so many casualties among civilians. And therefore we made this report, which tells about the south and tries to explain what was happening.
Yes. So thank you for showing the map. If I'm not mistaken, it represents roughly 1/3, right, of the total front line in Ukraine. But as you said, it's civilian population which lives along this front line by Dnipro. They are suffering a lot. So Vitalii, how actually those drones are used by whom, and what are the consequences of these attacks that you have documented?
So as I said, these drones are really, really precise technology, and so basically, they should be used against the Ukrainian military, and they are very, in a sense, a tactical weapon. So the small drones could be used against small targets, such as a car, flat in a multi-story building, against the gas station, for example. And they are not used against some large objects, because to eliminate large targets you would use missiles or large drones like Shaheds. They are a very tactical weapon that is used in a moment, and that I would say that the problem with these attacks, that the Russian army has a very low standards of precautions, and they just do not make enough steps to distinguish military and civilian targets. And for example, if the Russian pilot starts the drone flight, he could lead the drone and just see a car drive in the street, and he would attack the car, and he would not care much to distinguish whether it's a civilian car or a military car. He would just hit it and would not care much about the consequences, because as I said, there's very low level of discipline in the Russian army, and low level of control of what's happening. And in some cases, these attacks could be intentional. And there's also a way to think about Russian drones, because there's a high level of responsibility on a specific pilot. If you talk about artillery of missiles, the servicemen who launch the shells and missiles, they do not have this awareness of what exactly is the target they attack. But if you talk about the small drone, which is controlled by this pilot, he is very clearly aware of what's happening on the ground, and therefore his level of responsibility is very high for what's happening, and that's the best way to explain these attacks, I think, through this carelessness and recklessness of a Russian army, and we've seen that many times. So I've been to Kherson, I've been to Nikopol. These are two largest cities on the western bank of Dnipro, which suffer from drone attacks, and I've seen this pattern that the attacks are conducted sort of recklessly when you see that you don't see that much evidence that the attack was obviously the intent was to inflict the harm on civilians, but you do not see also any precautions made to protect the civilians from being attacked. And for example, Nikopol and Kherson, they are big cities where civilians and military live together, and this is the pattern that if there are cars on the roads or pedestrians on streets, Russian drones would just attack everyone and do not make any distinguishment. And this is how it's happening, because they have this sense that there would be no responsibility probably for them for what they are doing. And these drones, they are sort of omnipresent. They are around so this green line, this is the part of the front line with the highest intensity of attacks. They are around there are thousands of attacks daily in this area. The Nikopol and the Ochakiv parts, they have a bit lesser intensity of attacks. There could be a few hundreds attacks per day in these areas, but nevertheless the threat is omnipresent, and we also see that the amount of drone attacks comparing to artillery attacks rises over time. So this is the map that was given to us by Nikopol City Council, and it clearly shows that the ratio between artillery and drone attacks changes, and the amount of drone attacks is rising over time, and in 2025 it has become prevailing over artillery attacks, and that's the tendency that would go on, that drones are used more and more massively, and they are becoming the main weapon used in this region, and I think in general on the front line in Ukraine. And probably I also can show this graph, so it gives the idea what the drones are attacking, and the most targeted objects are vehicles, and that makes sense because vehicles are movable, and it's hard to hit the vehicle with artillery shell or a mortar shell, but you can do that with the drone, because the drone could follow the vehicle and target it even when the vehicle is moving. And there's this also a good help in analyzing these attacks and explaining them are Russian Telegram channels. So many Russian units have Telegram channels where they post videos of these attacks, and especially there are many channels affiliated with the military units that serve in the south, and one of those channels is called From Mariupol to Carpathians, and the author of the channel uses the term red zone to designate the Kherson city, and he says that that's a rule in Russian army that serves in the region, that any movable targets in Kherson would be eliminated, and he warns therefore civilians in Kherson that the specific part of the city near the river bank is completely endangered, and you cannot even move there without the risk, and therefore that means that all the vehicles that are moving in this part of Kherson could be attacked by Russian drones, And there again, it proves that there is no distinguishment between military and civilian targets, that Russian pilots don't make these precautions to distinguish. And there's also another tactic, which is called wild hunt. I think this is the tactic when the Russian pilots do not have preliminary targets. So there are two ways to conduct drone attacks. One way is when the reconnaissance drone flies the sky and suggests the targets for the armed drone, and then the armed drone starts the flight and attacks the targets which were suggested by the reconnaissance drones. And that's the one way to do this. And the other way is this wild hunt regime, when the armed drone flies to the sky, but he does not have the selected targets. He just hovers over cities, over villages, and he finds targets in the process. And this is the more risky for civilians than this first tactic, because these drones, they could not return to the pilot safely. So if you fly an armed drone like this, you need to use it during the flight. But the time of the flight, time span, is limited. You have only 10 to 15 minutes of the battery charge to conduct the attack, and often half of this time you need to cross the Dnipro river, because, as I said, this is a large river, and therefore you have very limited time to choose the target. And often you choose, this is the tendency, like hypothesis we have, that Russian operators just don't have enough time to choose the wisely the target, and they just attack anything that seems to be connected to military, but often it is not. And this again points to this recklessness and unprofessionalism. So, I mean, this is the quick overview of what's going on in the south. This is the omnipresent danger of drone attacks. This is also another ratio made by UN, and it shows the amount of civilians killed and injured by drone attacks in Ukraine. And we also see how these numbers are rising each year, and that again tells that Russian army probably does not make any precautions and implementations in the army discipline to prevent these attacks. They only rise over time. And this is happening in the south. And in the south, it is happening most blatantly, in a sense, but it is also happening in other parts of the front line. It's happening in the east, in the north, and the civilians are endangered by drones and by other means of warfare all around Ukraine, on the front line specifically, but in other parts of Ukraine too. And that would be the brief overview. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Vitalii. And I think you spoke already a little bit how it looks like from the view of those who actually operate them. But we also have a video, right? So we could see how those attacks are carried out. So if we could see it, because then it shows you what actually those who operate drones, what they see. So on the one hand, we have these drones, right, which have a camera, so they actually would be able to distinguish better their targets, right, because they can see where they are shooting. If you compare to missiles, as Vitalii said, you would those who are shooting them, they would not know exactly where it would land. But here you have the means of precision, but then on the other hand, they are not used. So Terje, I would like to turn to you. I mean, this means of warfare, not distinguishing between the civilian and population and the soldiers, for instance. But is there a problem you see from the perspective of international criminal law and how to prosecute these potential war crimes?
Yes, thank you. You've seen the video. I read a report by Truth Hounds. It's impressive reports in many ways, quite detailed, showing the evidence that you have collected. And the time that you investigated, I think, was between March and May last year, that period. Actually, there are also other reports. There is one report by Human Rights Watch, which came out after your report last summer. And then there are reports by the UN Independent Commission on Ukraine, investigating war crimes, crimes against humanity, human rights violations of humanitarian law, actually headed by Norwegian, Erik Møse. And they made a special report also on the Kherson area, the same with Human Rights Watch. Actually, we have 3 different reports made independently, and more or less the findings are the same. So yes, definitely there are problems with international criminal law relating to war crimes. You mentioned the lack of distinction, which could be a separate war crime, but you also have the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population or individuals within the population not taking part in the hostilities. And I think what we saw here are just cars driving around, not taking part in any hostilities. And then you have also some other war crimes that could be relevant. You have the war crime, or you mentioned that the Russians are posting videos, some graphic videos of people being killed, maybe people that could be identified. And that could be a distinct war crime relating to the human dignity, humiliating and degrading treatment, the posting of the videos itself. And in addition, there is the question also if the purpose of these attacks are partly to move the population, part of the population. It's a war crime of forcing people to move from their areas, even within the country. So there could be at least 3 or 4 different war crimes. Yeah. And then you have the question about how to prove not only what actually happened, but what you mentioned, the mental element, because if there should be a trial, it will also have to be proved that there was an intent, and what does it mean with regard to these war crimes. So I think it's very important that you make these investigations, providing evidence of the individual single drone attacks as far as you can, and then taken together, they will also provide a pattern a pattern of the attacks, which makes it possible to infer intent from the totality of the acts when you see everything in connection with each other. So it would be possible to prove, I think, that the perpetrator either meant to kill the person or at least injure a person, or that the drone operator was aware of the likely consequence of the attack. And then it's not only the drone operator that would be interesting to international criminal law. It will also be those who gave the orders to have this practice of the drone attacks. And then the question is how far up in the military hierarchy you can come to establish responsibility, because it's not only a possible responsibility for direct ordering the attack, but it's also what's called command responsibility, which is responsibility for omissions, for not preventing these drone attacks against civilians taking place. So in that respect, it would be possible to establish responsibility, at least in theory. That would be possible. And in addition to war crimes, could also be crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity requires that there is a systematic or large-scale attack against the civilian population. There has to be a policy behind it. Has to be usually planned and in conformity with in this case a state policy, Russian state policy, or drone attacks. And if these elements are proven, and it's also proven that the drone operator or the commanders that one identifies actually knew about this context, which is quite likely that they do. That is not only the single drone attack or the drone attacks that they are themselves directly involved in, but they know that this is going on. And this seems quite likely that could be proven, taking into account the long period of time that these attacks have occurred, and that they seems to be systematic in the way they are carried out. So that then it could be the crimes against humanity or murder first and foremost that would be relevant.
There are different levels of prosecution here, from those who are actually using the drones, right, to the commanders and so on, and the question of hierarchy. But I wanted to turn to you, Vitalii, exactly with the question: how is it possible to attribute, right, the concrete drone attack to concrete Russian soldier, for instance, or to concrete military unit? I mean, you already mentioned using Telegram channels and probably some other open source material. So could you explain a little bit how you proceeded for documenting concrete attacks and to attributing it to a concrete person or military unit?
Yeah, I can start from documenting the attacks. And that is a great challenge for us to document drone attacks, because we needed to create a new methodology for documenting drone attacks, because the methodology we applied to documenting artillery attacks or missile attacks did not quite fit here, because drone attacks are conducted in a completely different way, and you need to figure out completely other details to have this understanding of how this attack was conducted and whether it was intentional. Because if you're talking about artillery attacks, they are conducted more or less in the same way every time, and you need to analyze the crater that the shell made or the missile made, and then you can theorize about from what direction the attack was conducted and what type of shell or missile was used. And this does not work with drones. Drone explosions can leave craters, but they are not of much use. And with drones, you need to focus on the maneuvers and movement of the drone in the air, and whether it accelerated or not, and what type of sound it made. And this is a completely new methodology in a sense of documenting, and of completely other list of questions you need to ask a witness or a victim of the attack. And this is also in the report, so we've left it as the example of how these attacks could be documented. And this is also important because drones could be jammed or they could malfunction, and not all the incidents when drone inflicts damage on civilians are intentional. Most of them are, but you need to make sure, and that's why you need to ask all those questions. And we had the interview with the drone expert who explained us how to understand whether the drone meant to attack certain target or not, and that's through analyzing all those movements, acceleration, speed, sound, etc. And in fact, that's quite a complicated job of doing that, and we've been doing this, we've been asking these questions, and in most cases we were able to prove that drones meant to attack certain civilian objects. And yeah, that's again about the issue that drones are a new technology, and they are a challenge not only for military but also for law enforcement organs, for example, to properly document it and to prove with evidence that the attacks were intentional. And talking about responsibility and how we attributed certain attacks to certain Russian units, I would say that in some cases it was extremely easy because many Russian units, as I said, have their Telegram channels where they post these videos, and sometimes they even post the names of pilots who conducted the attack. Not names, but call signs of pilots who conducted the attack. And I'm not sure that we can play this video, but this screenshot on the screen, this is a screenshot from Russian Telegram channel. And it depicts the drone that attacked 2 civilians in the village of Antonievka. This is the village near Kherson, the city on the western bank of Dnipro. And this description says that the drone attacked 2 Ukrainian servicemen. However, these people are dressed in civilian clothes. And that's the popular narrative among Russian Telegram channels, that Ukrainian servicemen use civilian clothes to disguise themselves, and therefore the attacks they post, even though these people on those videos look like civilians, they are Ukrainian army servicemen. And with this video, the story is that we documented the son of the person who was attacked on it, and that person was civilian, and we've figured that out through this interview. So we met with the boy. His name is Kostya. He was 17 at the moment. It was in Kherson, and we interviewed him about life in the city, about the attacks he witnessed. And at some point, he says that the drone attacked his father, and he says there's the video on Telegram, and he shows us this video in particular, and shows that there's his father on it, and his father is civilian. He works in Kherson and has a civilian job, and that's how we prove that Russian channels manipulate and speculate a lot. And this is not the only such example. Such examples are numerous when they try to adjust the reality to their needs, to their requirements in a sense, but the reality is different from how they build this narrative of what's going on in Kherson and in other parts of the riverbank. And yeah, we've like this we've made a list of around 10 units. Some of them are brigades, quite big, but we also put on the list some smaller units as battalions and companies, and this is just through this observing of Telegram channels, and that means that also that Russian army units do not hide this. They do not try to disguise what is. They disguise, but they do not hide it completely. So they show these videos numerously on Telegram, and in a sense, they believe that what they are doing is right. They justify it, and they do it through manipulations and altering the reality. But in the frameworks of those who administer these Telegram channels, what they do is right, and they find these ways to explain these attacks and to justify them, mostly through manipulation and speculation. Yes.
So actually your work at Truth Hounds documenting this is very important, right? To reveal that actually what was posted on this channel is not true, right? Those are not Ukrainian armed forces. And that's thanks to such organization as yours that we can collect this type of evidence. But before we move on to some other questions, I wanted to ask if there are any questions from the audience to the speakers or to the report. Yes.
Hello, my name is Sebastian. Thank you for sharing. And I was wondering if you think there are any high-level strategy to harass the civilian population. So if they can see that our army isn't protecting us, they can protect us from this. The morale is going down, and it's somehow a strategy. That's my. What's your view on that perspective?
Well, I'd say that the Russian military commandment is definitely aware of what's happening with the small drone attacks, and they are aware of the damage it inflicts on civilian and civilian objects, and we also see no reaction. We do not see any steps to prevent these from Russian commandment. And there's also the story with the Human Rights Watch report. Human Rights Watch made this report about Kherson, and they have sent it to Russian military headquarters and to Ministry of Defense via email, and they just didn't receive any reply. And this is only media, this is only news, so definitely the commandment knows about this, and if it does not make any steps to prevent this, that might mean that they have some strategy behind these attacks. And if we make the hypothesis how the commandment might see these attacks beneficial, but this is not about raising the morale of the army, but more about the practical use of it. The hypothesis is that for commandment, that might be about pushing the civilians away from the front line, from the riverbank in this case, because when you push the civilians out, it becomes easier to find military targets and to eliminate military targets, and that's why Russian drones often attack gas stations, energy facilities. They attack residential buildings. Sometimes they use incendiary weapons that may make flame, and they just burn out whole apartments with drones that drop this munition. And this is all about making these places uninhabitable for civilians. Russian drones also attack firefighters, and they also often publish videos of attacks on firefighters. And for many of Russian people who administer these Telegram channels, this is lawful because they say that firefighters also extinguish flames on military objects. But anyway, this is about inflicting more damage on the infrastructure of villages, towns, and making civilians flee. And when the territory is cleared from civilians, it's easier to operate and find military targets, because when in Kherson still in Einarsen still around 30,000 people live, and with all those people it's hard to spot these military targets and to make this distinguishment. And the more civilians you push out by making places uninhabitable and by inflicting this sense of terror that people feel themselves hunted and unprotected, and when this happens, when civilians flee, it's just easier to fight the adversary. And that might be like the rational explanation why Russian commandment does not do any steps to prevent these attacks and to stop them.
Thank you for presenting the report, Vitalii. And also, I really wanted to mention that we're from the same home unit, the same year. I was very pleased to see the speaker from Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. I wanted to ask a question regarding... I want to make a disclaimer. I don't know if this is something that is okay to be public. If not, I understand. But I wanted to ask, how does your team kind of secure yourselves when you come to places like Kherson or Nikopol to interview the civilians while this safari on civilians is happening? I assume that when you guys have equipment, you're quite visible as well to drone pilots. So do you have any strategies, any steps that you take before coming on those trips to come back from them alive? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Probably I can touch another topic that is in the presentation, and that is about civilian defense. You can make steps to protect yourself from the drone, and the civilians in Ukraine have made many steps to do this, and there are different strategies of how to protect yourself. For example, there are nets that are put on over the roads to obstruct the drone from hitting the vehicles, or mostly the vehicles, or pedestrians. And there are also drone detectors, because these drones, they are controlled via radio connection, and therefore these detectors, they can spot the drone because it gives the radio signals. And this is what we used. We bought some radio detectors, and we have been carrying them with us on trips, and we were checking if there's, so that would be the sound if there's some suspicious radio signal, and if we receive this sound, we see what's going on. So there are different well, it's hard to explain in English, but yeah, this was of the use to us. And but nevertheless, these trips were really dangerous, because we had this understanding that we are not secure if we put on the blue vest, or if we mark our car to make it obvious we are civilians. That would not help, because usually that does not help. And that was a great challenge. That all the team that was in the office was really nervous when we've been on the trips to such places. And but I don't know what else to say. So yeah, that's really dangerous, and you should make all these precaution steps when you go in. Also, the weather is very important, because if there is sun, it's easier for drones to fly, and if there's no wind, it's complete. If there's a sun and no wind, this is the perfect weather for drones to fly. And we were checking the weather, and we were thinking if there would be fog or rain or maybe snow, that would help us a lot, because in the bad weather, drones usually do not fly. So we were keeping in mind what's with the weather. Also, in the dusk and during the night, it's more safe to move. There are drones with night vision, but they are a bit more expensive, and they are a bit more rare than ordinary drones. So it's more safe during the night. So we were keeping in mind all this, and we were having these detectors, and that helped us. But you can never fully protect yourself. There would always be a risk, because drones can fly in the rain. They can actually fly during the night. they might not be detected by the detector because they are also drones that fly on a fiber optic cable. These drones which are connected by a tiny cable to the control panel, and therefore they do not produce the radio signal because the connection is through the cable and the detector cannot find the signal, and therefore there are different types of drones, and there are many of them, and you never can protect yourself fully. And there's also artillery and missiles, which also pose a threat. Yeah, but all these precautionary steps they help, and again, it's much due to civilians who live in these areas and who were able to find these solutions of how to protect themselves.
More question. The graph you showed about the increase of fatalities by small drones. Yeah, I was wondering if, like, what is happening behind that graph? Is there more drones being produced? Are they being more efficient? Are they being produced by the Russian army, or like, can you say something about the supply chain?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's both the extension of producing drones and the increase of the preciseness. So with each year, the drones become more precise because the video feed quality increases, the level of control increases, the battery charge increases, and each side makes these solutions to make drones more efficient. So we see these fiber optic drones, they were new technology. They were introduced in late 2024 as the way to fight jammers, because radio controlled drones, they could be jammed by specific systems. So this is the race of technology, and with all the time drones increase in efficiency and in their capabilities, but there are also the increase of how many drones are produced, because there's also this race in quantity, and there's this belief and idea that and it's true that more drones you have, the more efficient your army is. So the increase in civilian casualties is the result of both tendencies of increasing quality and quantity of drones, and also the lack of any moves of the commandment to make some precautions. I think, yeah, if that's the answer.
I think there was a question by Martin. Oh, okay. Yes. So a lot of things which I had in mind were covered, and I see we are out of time already. But one maybe final question to Vitalii and Terje. What can we learn from this report, both for the civilian populations in Ukraine and otherwise, and about possibilities, and actually what are the probabilities of actually prosecuting those crimes which are being committed by Russia in Ukraine?
So I cannot say about the prosecution that much, but I can say that this report shows that the drones are game-changing technology, and they are the decisive technology at the moment, and probably they would remain such. So, and the drone use could be extended, and is extended in Ukraine right now to ground. So there are also ground drones which do evacuation, which also could be armed, and there are also water drones. So this is like about the grasping the tendencies in the military conflict, and the idea of drone is to secure people. Both, I think it's both about securing the military servicemen and civilian population, because the drones are very perspective technology, and we should think about them, and to think about how to make it work, because I believe that these drones we talk about here, they are the most precise military technology, and this is the chance to lift this danger from civilians. So these are technologies of the future, and we should think of how to protect civilians, because this is a very promising technology and it should be used wisely. And when it's used wisely, the civilians should not suffer. And this report for me is the example of how, in the wrong hands, the good technology could lead to very terrific consequences. And this is. But it also has some chance for the future, because we showed that drones could be operated wisely, and by Ukrainian armed forces, I believe they are operated much more wisely. There are also cases when civilians suffer in the occupied territories from drone attacks, but they are more scarce. And yeah, this is about thinking that drones are the future, and thinking about how to make drones clash, drones fight, and to lift it from civilians to drones. I think it's like this because the technology is really promising.
Thank you. And some notes from you, Terje?
Yes, from a legal point of view, in order to have prevention, to prevent these crimes, you need to have accountability mechanisms that are working. First, you need a jurisdiction for state authorities or international courts, which we have in this case. Ukraine, for instance, have of course territorial jurisdiction over all these attacks. The problem is how to prosecute in Ukraine if you can't get hold of the persons in Ukraine. I know you have the possibility to prosecute in absentia, so that could be something if responsible persons are identified. And then, of course, we have the International Criminal Court. Would have been interesting to have test cases on drone warfare. The ICC has jurisdiction also with respect to everything that's happening on the Ukrainian territory. The problem for the ICC, especially these days, is that the court is under substantial attack, in particular from the United States. They are attacking the key prosecutors. They are attacking judges. I think it's 9 judges now that are sanctioned severely by the United States. All the top 3 prosecutors are sanctioned. And this takes out a lot of energy of the court, I think. In addition, the ICC is not going to prosecute the drone operators. They will have to identify persons that are considered more responsible higher up in the hierarchy. But that could be. So, I mean, in theory, it would be possible for the ICC to set out the policy, to have test cases on drone attacks. Hopefully, we'll see that in the future. Right now, it seems quite difficult. Also because other states, like European states, are not really supporting the court as they should. No one is really speaking out against the terror against the court by the United States, by Russia. Russia is prosecuting key personnel at the ICC in the wrong courts. You have Israel that has threatened the court, threatened personnel. You have even the former UK Prime Minister Cameron, who threatened Karim Khan relating to the arrest warrants against Netanyahu. And you have all the other political leaders who are not speaking out on anything in any meaningful ways. So then you have, of course, the domestic prosecutors in Europe, which is also a possibility if there is jurisdiction. many European states have universal jurisdiction. Could also be a passive nationality jurisdiction. For instance, if Ukrainians in Norway with temporary protection here goes back to Ukraine and are then attacked by the drones, that is also a possible separate basis for jurisdiction. But the problem with the European prosecutors so far, that they are passive. They are just spectators looking at what's happening. There is no really meaningful initiatives, and also the politicians are not supporting such prosecutions. So maybe that would change in the future, but of course this is not something that we should wait for 10 years. It should happen now. So that's up to us to hold our politicians and prosecutors to account. But that's also not happening. There are some organizations trying to push prosecutors, but it's not really happening much. So unfortunately.
It is really unfortunate, but that only means that the reports such as by Truth Hounds are really important, that we have it documented from the beginning on, right, what is happening, and hopefully those materials will be used in the future to prosecute. I know from Vitalii that actually that there was some contact with the prosecutors in Ukraine using the reports to actually identify the perpetrators and actually hope to get some justice. But maybe as Terje elaborated, maybe we should not be too optimistic about having all the crimes committed by Russia actually be prosecuted during the current situation. And just one last note for me, we focused, of course, a lot on Ukraine and how those drones are used there. But those are drones which can be bought at L-Shop, for instance. You can buy it everywhere, and most of those drones are actually produced by Chinese company, DJI. They produce Mavic and other things. So it kind of opens another dimension for discussion about the use of drones and their distribution on the global scale. And actually, last autumn, the U.S. Federal Communication Commission, they banned imports of all new models of foreign-made drones. So it looks like some countries are taking it much more seriously nowadays. What civilian drones can be imported into the country. So we will see how it will be developed. How it will develop in European countries. Thinking about all the incidents with drones being flown close to the critical infrastructure, such as airports, for instance. So drones will definitely, drones have definitely changed the battlefield as we know it, but they also create a lot of questions when it comes to the civilian population. And actually, the last 2 weeks, the Norwegian Police Security Service, they published this national threat assessment. They did not address drones in a military context yet, but they see it as potential threat from extremist groups, right, which could buy these drones, which you can buy at any store. And there is a fear that those could be used within Norway, for instance. And we've shown videos what they can do, right? We are not talking only about this kamikaze type of drones, which are flying in and exploding, for instance. We are also talking about regular drones to which you can just attach a grenade. So I would like to thank you, my fellow panelists, for this discussion. I would like to thank the audience for being here with us, and we hope to be discussing these issues in further events as well. So thank you very much.